Hey, Matt.
Hey, Ryan.
I am a Viking. I'm going out to war.
I had a sinking suspicion that those were the lyrics you're going to go with because they're just too good.
On the day of our Lord where the Pittsburgh Penguins have to win in order to keep their playoff hopes alive, I feel like it's very appropriate, lyrics to choose, considering that we're going to the game tonight.
Yeah. And hopefully by the end of the night we can look at the Nashville Predators and say, you are a loser.
I see what you did there. And welcome back, everyone, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. We are called Hey, Listen to This. I am the one, the only, the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, constantly disputed Matthew Durzik.
And if this is your first time listening in to this podcast, first of all, welcome. Second of all, what we do here is me and Matt, essentially, we go over albums. We each take a turn picking an album we're going to dissect track by track. It could be we can go as detailed as we want to, or we could be like, hey, yep. This isn't for me, or hey, it does its purpose, or hey, a phrase that we often use here is the nothing burger. So, and last week we found out what it meant to bleed American. Both me and Matt had good, positive things to say about that album as a whole. And this week, Matt has decided to take us into another complete, random musical direction. And Matt, what do you got cooked up for us this week?
I am taking us to the year of 1985, and this being the era of heavy metal, I am choosing an album that sort of was a pioneering thrash album. I've seen it listed as neoclassical metal. I've seen it listed as heavy metal, but whatever you call it genre-wise, the album title is called Marching Out by one Swedish guitarist, Yngwie Malmsteen, or more specifically, Yngwie J. Malmsteen's Rising Force, because that is the name of the band. And Malmsteen is, as I said, a Swedish guitarist. He's one of those guys that you didn't really hear about in modern times until the era of Guitar Hero, where it seemed like guitar was all the rage. And all of a sudden, when I was in high school, all these kids would be into, learning about these other guitarists, like you would start with your obvious ones like Hendrix and Page and whoever. And then when you really got, dug down into the likes of, the real, intricate guitar players, then you get the guys like Yngwie Malmsteen, because Malmsteen is not a household name, but if you're a metalhead or a guitar nerd, he's the guy that, comes up quite a lot. And this album, without getting too deep into it right now, there's a lot of proof why.
So, growing up, how did you... Because I don't think you grew up a metalhead. How did you discover this fine gentleman here?
Well, again, I'd heard of him, but I didn't really discover him until... I want to say it was one day... It was either at, some yard sale or probably at Rogers in Ohio. I was just, skimming through the CDs, and I found this one for $1, and I'm thinking, oh, I've heard of this guy. I've heard he's a pretty good guitarist. I'll give it a spin. And I did, and I was like, okay, all right. And then after that, it's been, there's at least one track that has sort of stuck with me ever since, and this was probably almost a decade ago, I want to say, that I've had this record and been listening to it. But as we'll get into again, there's some good stuff on here.
Yeah, yeah. It's always nice having like those albums that like mean something to you specifically. Like you have that story about like how you picked up this album for $1 and it's been with you for a decade. I know like one album, not comparable by any means, but like one album that I constantly tell people that I grew up listening to, and I felt like it was kind of like my own album because not too many people have been talking about it. Is the debut album from One Good Charlotte. Just a little tangent there. I think it's nice having like that little personal relationship with specific albums. So, you ready to dissect this one album called Marching Out?
Yes.
So I am actually gonna take the reins here for at least the first two tracks, mainly because the first track, Prelude, it's not really much of a track. Let's be honest with you.
I have one note in my notes for the Prelude, which is to say it is in fact a prelude. That's it.
Yeah, like it almost seems like with this track here that we're kind of, I don't know, we're watching a movie and we're like 5,000 feet back away from the band, and we're gradually getting closer and closer and closer because you can hear like the faint guitar lines, and then right as we get into the first proper track on the album, which is I'll See the Light Tonight, that's when we get smacked with like the opening scene of said movie. So yeah, I feel like we're ready to talk about I'll See the Light Tonight. With that being said, so I'll See the Light Tonight. So right away, kicking off this track here, that jumpstarts the proper start to the album, you get exactly what this album is gonna bring to the table. You get nasty guitar licks, great heavy metal instrumentation. Like this is very much of the time from the 1980s. I like instantly like bands that I thought of comparable to this were a blend of like Van Halen and Iron Maiden. I went through my Van Halen and Iron Maiden phase, especially like when I was gonna go see Iron Maiden in concert live. But getting back into this track here. One thing that I'm always a sucker for is how, like, how a band tends to line up to draw ends to, like, phrases. And that you see this in the intro. And then one other note that I'm going to say about this track here, then I'll kick it over to you, is the background vocals towards the end of the phrase during the verses are a very nice touch. They work out so well. And yeah, overall, like, solid opener. I could really get behind it. Not really too many huge notes on the lyrics, because let's face it, there's like the lyrical depth is not really there, and that's not the point of this album.
It's not. And I mean, I will say, I mean, the lyrics are at least, coherent, because it's a song about, being, prisoner of war or being in a war. I mean, they don't really go much deeper than that, and it really doesn't have to, because the music speaks so well for this. And right away, we have my favorite track on the album.
There it is.
Because it is so good. Like you said, this was co-written by Malmsteen, and the vocalist on this track, one Jeff Scott Soto, and his vocals, like you said, with the background vocals, are amazing. The guitar solo that Malmsteen drops is amazing. The drums just really are tight and flourishing like you expect metal drums to be. Like, if you're a metal fan, this is a perfect track. And again, the lyrics are not necessarily anything like amazing, but they basically didn't have to be anything other than coherent in order for this song to work, and that's exactly what they are. And I agree with you. The background vocals on the verses, the sort of like powerful chords that they provide are just a nice little touch. The only problem I would have with this track is that, it comes out of the gate as the first track, and it is almost feels so like bombastic and powerful that you expect it at the end of the album if this were like an album that tells a story. But that is a very minor nitpick. Again, it's my favorite track on the album.
I can totally respect that opinion, man. And like, talk about like the guitar solo, backing up a couple of your statements there. I love how it begins with the guitar doing some cascading lines down, and it almost seems like the band is following suit. I really love that section here. I think it's one of the more solid solos off of the album, if I can remember them all, like, vividly and honestly. And then another, like, thing that I loved about the solos as a whole were, like, how in the solo section, how the backing band, they almost end specific phrases with the da-dum, da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum. Like, I kind of love calling back to that little motif. It speaks to my musical nerdum, to be honest with you. But... yeah, the only other thing that I will say here is the addition of synths in the second verse is a very nice touch. Overall, like, solid opener, man. If this is the way that you're going to kick off your album, you cannot think of a more solid way of doing it. So, that being said, are you ready to talk about Don't Let It End?
Let's talk about Don't Let It End. This is the second full track on the album, and it's a little different from the first, because it has a bit of a slower start, and unlike I'll See the Light Tonight, where it's just right in your face after the prelude, Don't Let It End just sort of builds piece by piece to the meat of the track. I definitely feel like the term neoclassical metal probably applies most to this track because the lyrics sound very poetic, and the instruments, the way they are played, almost seem like if you had switched out Yngwie Malmsteen's guitar for like a harpsichord, this would sound like something in a Shakespearean play. Like, that's how sort of eloquent this track is. And again, the drums, the guitar sound great. The only slight thing I would have to say about the song is that the way that the drums and the sort of fast-paced nature of the track is introduced is a little weird, because it's sort of, you're sort of expecting this, punch, and then you have this sort of call and response with Soto's vocals and the band that lead to that, which was, I don't, it's not bad, but at the same time, it's a little off-putting for it to build to this. It's almost like, as we talked about in the K-pop episode, an anti-drop, where it builds up to, what you think is the chorus, and then the band just cuts back, and all you hear is vocal. It's just like, oh, all right, well, I guess we're doing this now. But again, I think this is a solid track.
Yeah, I would say out of all the tracks here, this is my least favorite. Not saying it is a poo-poo track or anything like that. Also, like, to be honest with you, I think that's the first time I ever said poo-poo track in the history of our podcast here. So, anyways, like, there's a couple of reasons why, like, this it doesn't do it for me. Specifically, like, in the intro here. Let me just check my notes here. Like, in the opening verse, it just seems like at points the vocals, they get a little bit pitchy, like he's missing some notes, which, I mean, part of what brings me to, like, 80s heavy metal is, like, the sick guitar licks, the powerful vocals. But if you're not able to land those notes, I take a little bit of an issue with that. Because, like, maybe just change up how you're going to do it. Or, hey, I don't know, take a break, get a glass of water, come back tomorrow. Like, there's other things that you can do to make that sound a little bit better. And overall, like, I mean, overall, it's a decent enough song. I can get the concept of changing up the song structure at some points, but as you said, it kind of does come off a little bit weird. And, like, at points, like, comparing this to I'll See the Light Tonight, which is going to give more weight to the argument that you made in the previous track discussion about how, like, it's kind of hard making this be the opener because everything else following this is going to be compared to that. Like, at some points, this doesn't do enough for me to stand out on its own, and it just ends up being that kind of cliche 80s heavy metal kind of song, which, I mean, it's not bad in its own right, but still, for me, it doesn't, like, it makes me love the album a little less, to be honest with you.
I get that. It's and this is what I was talking about earlier with, like, juxtaposition. Like, I mean, I think a track like this is why you come out of the gate with I'll See the Light Tonight, even though that's such a grandiose, like, closing track that ultimately, if you had come out the gate with this, there'd be, record execs and fans alike that would have just been like, okay, I'm done. I'm not, this bores me. And that's, and like you said, this is basically as generic as it gets when it comes to metal. It doesn't really have that pop. It doesn't really have that, standout moment. Like, I think the drums and guitar on this track do sound good, but not in a way that exceeds the previous track. So, it's not my least favorite song on the album, but I completely understand why you say it is.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like, out of all the rest of the songs off the album here, dude, like, this is the only one I really had, like, a lot of nitpicks on. Like, there's other things I'll mention throughout the review that are, generally really positive, and, like, some stuff that I'm like, this is, like, honestly how I feel. So, like, overall, like, if I'm to be honest, like, this is indeed my least favorite. So, that being said, you ready to talk about some of those disciples of hell?
Let's talk about those disciples of hell.
So, we get another change up here. We go from, like, a blistering I'll See the Light Tonight to kind of a wonky Don't Let It End to a song that opens up with, like, nice acoustic Spanish guitar, kind of like, with that intro there, which is pretty pretty interesting. And how it switches off and it goes back into that electric, I feel like it pays off pretty well. And this might be one of the only times, one of two songs I'm going to say that the lyrics do a really good job painting the imagery here. The lyrics I'm going to highlight are, in the darkness they will gather, conjure the one, burning candles, incantations, human sacrifice. And, like, another thing that I'm just going to say is just, like, I like the whispers of rise that can be heard throughout the song. I feel like that pays off pretty well. And overall, the band's performance is pretty tight. And the solo that happens, it almost seems like it happens organically. And, that solo does develop very nicely. So, yeah. What's your thoughts?
Pretty much the same as yours. I agree that the execution by the band remains expert on this track. And I agree with you that even though the topic of, dealing with demons is rather kind of generic, it, again, just has to pass coherence in order for it to work. So if you're talking about very basic, cookie cutter demons, then it works. My only main issue with this track is the intro itself. because I agree with you that once it gets into gear, it does sound pretty and it does build up to the main part of the track nicely. But the first few seconds are, I think they're really sloppy. It's the sound of going fast without going fast in a proper direction, because it just sounds like he's just like, it's just like, you could have done that a whole lot better. But aside from that, I agree. This track is, it does its job.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to go back and listen to that intro just to, maybe zoom in on the that specific section just to see what you were putting down there. One other thing that I'm going to highlight off of here, and it's not really a highlight, it's more of my own nitpick here. The transition from the solo back into the song happens with a spoken word passage. And it just, I don't know, it kind of takes the punch out of the song for me, because it's just like, again, it's 1985, the production elements weren't as great at this moment. To kick off the, while we were doing the intro, you were giving the introduction to the album, I was taking a look at, albums that were released in 1985, and, the first one that came up was, that Kate Bush album that has Running Up That Hill. So, good production elements do exist, but I don't know, it was just a random, it took some of the wind out of the sails off the track for me. But overall, it's a decent enough track. It does its job pretty well. If it wasn't for that weird, spoken word passage, it would be a solid track for me. Did you have anything else to add to that, or are you ready to go on to I'm a Viking?
No. I think we pretty much set our piece on the track, so I think we're ready to move on to I Am a Viking.
I Am a Viking.
So, this track is probably the first track, and maybe the only track on the album that I feel digs back a little bit into what traditional heavy metal sounds like. It sounds more along the lines of something you'd hear from, a Black Sabbath, or Rainbow, or Deep Purple in a sense. Basically, it's one of those songs with 80s level reverb, and that's not a bad thing. I like this track a lot. I think it's a very simple, down-to-earth track as far as songs about Vikings can be, and I think, again, the lyrics are very good. It definitely paints a picture of, being this Viking at sea, ready to conquer all that he sees. The guitar solo is fantastic. It definitely does change things up pace-wise. It's not as fast, but it definitely has a nice, strong groove in the ground. I think this is one of the better tracks on the album, honestly.
I would absolutely agree, and if I could be very honest with you as well, this song here is my favorite off the whole album. It's such a solid track that doesn't really rely on, hey, we're gonna go 150 miles per hour in terms of the instrumentation. The sludginess works out so well. The vocal performance is so tight. The lyrics, like you mentioned, they really do paint an excellent picture. And just even moments where the guitar and the vocals line up in certain spots, it always gets my ears perking, and I always appreciate moments like that. And yeah, overall, it's really, really a great track. The lyrics that I'm going to highlight here of this track are, I am a warrior, my mind is set to kill. Life or death is on the line. I am a slayer, you will taste my steel. I've got your life right in my hand. And with those lyrics and how the backing of the track works, like you can really just picture like in your head, like, you know, you're on a ship, you're a Viking, you're about to, like, you know, go conquer a land, and like the guitar solo is really, really great. Overall though, like it's a really great track, and it really does pick up the momentum of the my appreciation of the whole album at this point. So that being said, you ready to move on to Overture 1383?
Yeah, just with one final thing to say about I Am a Viking, which my only tiny nitpick with it is I wish that the outro, which is pretty good itself, has sort of these spacey Brian May vibes that are going on. Like anyone who's a fan of Brian May will like a lot of Yngwie Malmsteen. I wish I could have mixed that in or transitioned to that a little bit better, but that's a very minor nitpick on what is otherwise one of the better tracks on the album.
Yeah, I can totally get that. So, Overture 1383. Really not much to say about this. This is like, there's a little bit more meat to the bone on this track compared to, like, you know, Prelude, because like this, I almost feel like, again, I don't own this album on vinyl, so I don't know if this would be the proper, like, you know, side A closer, but it almost does seem like either that or it's like the opening to side B off the record, because it almost just seems like it's wrapping up and it's almost like a transition point, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and that's a very good point, because I had not thought about that, because I have this on CD, not on vinyl. And to me, the way this transition is kind of, it comes off very weird when you're listening to the album front to back as a whole without any flipping of the record or any like A-side, B-side mentality. Because what happens on this track is it starts with this fast-paced instrumental shuffle, almost like a something you hear from like Metallica or like maybe early Queen, before it goes right back to the style that was part of the outro on I Am a Viking. It's basically the same exact thing. And when you hear it on the CD, it's just like, okay, we're going from spacey to really fast to spacey again. In the fast part was only like a minute long, so like what's the point of it? But like you said, it's if this is the opening track to the second side, which I would probably imagine is the case, I get it. It's not like me giving it high praise or anything, but I do get it.
Yeah. I don't know. I do like the contrast there. I feel like it pays off pretty well, but I can understand it. Just like, hey, like, you know, we had this point here. What's the point of like only doing like the galloping like instrumentation, only for us to transition into like something a little bit more slow, spacey, soulful? No, I totally get it, man. That being said, you want to talk about some anguish and fear?
Let's talk about some anguish and fear. So I have listed in my notes, this is kind of a proto-thrash speed song. Just, again, a song that, if songs like I'll See the Light Tonight and Don't Let It Ever Go 100 miles an hour, this is like 150 miles an hour. It just goes very fast. I didn't mind this track so much, except for the fact that it seemed like everything was kind of mixed high and together. Like, up until now, like, everything seems to be on its right level sound-wise, but it seems like everything just sort of is, like, mixed to the front here, and I thought that was kind of a bit of a turn-off for me personally. But otherwise, it's a solid track. The guitar solo seems very call and response. I think there's like a either like a synth or a harpsichord that's being used there with a guitar. So I did kind of dig that, but aside from that,
Yeah, like, to be honest with you, like, the main note that I have for this song here is, like, I feel like this song is kind of like a nothing burger with some special sauce on top of it. Like, I The special sauce is that contrasting solo section that you literally just mentioned. I feel like that pays off pretty well. But like I don't know, like the chorus, I feel like it could have popped a little bit better, and it just seemed like everything was like a little bit more, I don't know, like they were waiting for the guitar to solo or do its thing. Like the rest of the band was just like what do we do? Let's go really fast. Let's go really fast. And but yeah, and overall, like, this is definitely one of the weaker tracks off the album. Not as weak as Don't Let It End, because there's not a legit nitpick with the performance of what got to the final cut. But overall, I mean, I really like that solo section, but not really doing it for me in the long run, if I can be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's mostly a nothing burger. It's a track. It's fine. It works within the context of the album. Would I really seek it out as an individual track? No. But is it the worst thing I've ever heard? Also no.
Yeah, true. All right, so ready to move on to On the Run again?
Yes.
So we go from a track where it just seems like, we have that nice solo section with Anguish and Fear, but not a whole lot else that was left for the rest of the band to chew on. But this song here, I feel like it's just a solid song, to be honest with you. Like, the opening part where the crunchy guitars and like there's that lead guitar soloing over everything else works out pretty well. Like they work in harmony pretty well together. The vocal performance on this track is pretty much on point, and I love how the band does come together at points in this song to guide the song along with the vocals. Overall, solid track for me, in my opinion.
Honestly, for me, it's probably the least favorite track of mine on the album. Not that it's terrible, but it seems to be the closest to me to like typical 80s metal. Like, we talked about how I Am a Viking sounds a lot like 70s metal, and how I'll See the Light Tonight is very good, like 80s metal that sort of, pushes to where it's going to go in the 90s. But to me, this sounds like a seaside for like Motley Crue almost. And what I don't like about it is the fact that it seems to be very uneven and all over the place structure-wise. Like, it starts with the typical verse, chorus, then it has a bridge, and then another bridge that kind of just sits there. It just felt like they were trying everything and anything on this song. And actually, I looked it up. This is actually a remake of a song that Malmsteen had recorded back in 1983 called Victim of the City. So this is basically a remake or a rewrite of this. So a lot of it does feel a bit shoehorned. Again, is it the worst thing I've ever heard? No, but as far as this album, it's probably the track that does the least for me.
I'll be perfectly honest with you, I can really respect that opinion, because like, even before we got on the call to do the review here today, man, like, I had to go back into listening to this track, because like, out of all the tracks here, like, this is the one that kind of least remembered. It almost fell victim to being a memory hold track for me, like how we did when we did the FX episode, and I could not remember for the life of me the song Toy. And I still can't remember it. But yeah, like, overall, like, it's a solid track for me, but nothing really like even if you would rewind, and it was more like what stood out in this song here was the band's performance of the compositional structure. But in terms of like anything out of the ordinary, anything noteworthy, not really specifically. Like, it's really just, it kind of just does its own thing, and it doesn't really stand out. So yeah, I totally get that.
So I really don't have much more to say about this track. Are you ready to discuss Soldier Without Faith?
So I'm gonna let you kick this one off, because I did On the Run again.
Yeah, so Soldier Without Faith does, after a couple tracks, return this album to a sort of level standing. Not the other two tracks were horrible, but this track is pretty good. And what makes this track interesting is that it starts with what I'm pretty sure is a mix of guitar and either real flute or synth flute, but either way I was just like, is that a flute I hear on this hardcore metal album? Okay. So that was interesting. The guitar solo at the start of the song I think is really good. Aside from that, I mean, the lyrics are fine. The band sounds fine. But what made this track most interesting to me is how it sounds like other songs, one older than this song, one newer than this song. So the way that the choruses end with that dun 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 dun, like I'm thinking, oh, is that from Heart's Magic Man? Because that's what that sounds like. That sounds like Magic Man. But later on in the track, I heard a riff that sounded like Master of Puppets, which wouldn't be released for another year. So I'm thinking, interesting. But aside from that, I mean, I think this track is really solid. I do sort of like the groove of it. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I do like it as well. Like, I feel like even just, spitballing my thoughts right now to you on my computer screen in front of me, making for excellent podcasting content here right now, but I digress. But like, I feel like the groove on the chorus, where he's talking about like, gotta get out of here, ba-da-da-da-da. Like, I'm not even looking at the lyrics right now. I'm just spitballing off the top of my head, and I feel like that's one of the best grooves off the album, to be perfectly honest with you. The flute on the intro is very nice, like you said. One of my nitpicks off this track here is the vocals at some points, they feel a little bit strained. And I know, heavy metal album from the 80s, like, you're not really especially with like how this specific artist here is more centered around the guitar solos and how like they happen. Like, dude, just like I said with Don't Let It End, like drink a cup of like chamomile tea with honey, come back tomorrow, try again later. Like, you don't have to like go with the track and be like, it's fine, it's good on its own. Like, no, like, actually you have a good voice, let it let it shine.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, but at the same time, like, if the music's there, it's gonna be fun. I think the music is definitely here. The structure is here, and I'll admit I tend to favor tracks a little more when they have a pretty, bone cut and dry structure. And this track has it. I don't think On the Run Again had it. I think Anguish and Fear was a little muddled too, but Soldier Without Faith is a very grounded, structured, proper song. So even if the vocals are a little I could forgive that, and that kind of is the case with the next track too.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little unforgiving at points, but that being said, we'll just groove on into Caught in the Middle, not to be confused with The Middle as the other review that we just did. Now I'm
just imagining Yngwie Malmsteen trying to cover the middle, and it's the most glorious thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I love it. Well, nope, not going off on that tangent there. So overall, like, how this track here starts out, like, it's a very solid opening with the guitar and the drum playing off of each other, and overall, like, I have a nitpick off of this track here, and this is where we get into the guitar. Like, you talked about like how in Disciples of Hell, like with that little intro there, it just seemed like he was a little bit offbeat, and like he was like, not really centered. And I think the phrase that you mentioned was going fast without a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the solo here off the track, it almost seems like it goes off tempo, and for a precision driven project as, like, especially with how the guitars are such front and center throughout this whole album, for this to be like for this to be like one of your last songs off the album, for a guitar solo to like just almost seem like it's offbeat, it kind of does take away from the album, in my opinion.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with you. I don't think this is one of the best songs on the album, but I thought that the solos on Caught in the Middle are actually quite good. Are they amazing? Are they, first rate? Not necessarily, but I didn't have a problem with them. If I had a problem with anything on this song, it is the lyrics. Because to me, I think the lyrics suck. Like, and I know, again, it's 80s metal, so we can't, like, expect too much. But even for, like, all the other tracks on here, like, what the, sort of, I Am a Viking is about being a Viking. Disciples of Hell, it's like, oh, we're in hell. Where are the demons? They're very basic, but they're basic that they're smart enough, they're structured enough to be, to do the job that they need to do. Here, it just seems like these were the first lyrics they came up with. They were just like riffing. It's just like, oh, this rhymes, write it down, let's record it. They seem very first draft. But in this case, I think the music, the solos, and the execution of the band actually save the track from being the absolute worst on the album. Aside from that, though, I can't really say too much more about this. And I do kind of agree with you that as far as this being the album closer, or at least the closer as far as like a full band plus vocal effort, it is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I even as you were talking, I took a quick peek into the lyrics just to see what you were talking about. Like, yeah, I could definitely see what you were saying. That the lyrics absolutely kind of, they do suck. But yeah, overall, like my feelings are caught in the middle. It just seems like it's, I don't know, like, between the solo section and being a little bit offbeat, in my opinion, and just how the lyrics come off, it almost seems like it's almost like just a cliche ending to an 80s album, which is kind of unfortunate to say as a whole, considering like this whole album began with I'll See the Light Tonight, and how that was such a blistering song. You almost feel like flip it in reverse, like have Caught in the Middle be the opening, and then I'll See the Light Tonight be the ending, and you get a fantastic journey throughout the whole album here. That being said, the last track is Marching Out. And Matt, do you want to march us out?
Marching Out is the final track on the album, and it's kind of built in the same way as Overture 1383, which is to say it starts really fun, really upbeat, really fast, and then it just sort of slows down to this like march-like jam where it's just, very drifting out into the open abyss, whether it's, land without field or a sea without sun, or whatever the case may be. I really don't have a whole lot to say about this track. It's fine, but it is kind of a weird closer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, there's not really much else I can really say off of here. I mean, it does a good job. It's almost like a roll credits kind of song here. So, yeah, whole lot not else to say, man, to be honest with you, off the track here. So, yeah, we did it, man.
We did it.
We found out what it means to be marching out.
Yes, particularly marching in and out of connectivity. So, that being said, your thoughts on the album?
So, overall, my thoughts on the album are... This album does a good enough job giving the listener what the genre had to offer to the had to offer at the time. The guitar solos are really, really good. Vocal performances can be a little bit spotty at times, like when it's on with like songs like "I'll See the Light Tonight" and even like "I Am a Viking," like those songs are really, really good. And even like "Disciples of Hell," just a couple other spots here, but like when it gets pitchy and strained, it takes away from the album, in my opinion. There are moments where I can be completely honest with you. The songs kind of have the tendency maybe to blend together after a while. There are solid moments, though, where the band does come together compositionally with even if it's like coming up with like, spots where it matches the vocals or just brings certain ends of phrases well enough together. So that being said, my rating off of this album here, it's gonna be a solid 7 out of 10.
I can agree with that. I am also going to give this album a 7 out of 10 because for all of its flaws, whether it be the lyrics on Caught in the Middle or the unevenness of On the Run Again, the highlights of this album in I'll See the Light Tonight and I Am a Viking do shine above those. And really, for again, the nitpicks that we have, for if you're a metal fan and you like metal and you like guitar solos, you like fast drums, and you like very operatic vocals, this is an album you're gonna love. And I thought it was, again, expertly done throughout. The execution by the band was pretty solid throughout, and yeah, it's a 7 out of 10 for me as well.
And for the next album recommendation that I have here, based off of what I heard in this album, I would recommend the album from Iron Maiden called The Number of the Beast. It was just the closest comparison I could think of in terms of like 80s album, the feel that I got off of this specific album here. So, Matt, what you got for us on the next album recommendation front?
My recommendation would actually be going back a year from this album to the year 1984 with the album 1984 by Van Halen. Very much an album that tends to go in different places and definitely has the same level of pyrotechnics, but does also feature a lot of 80s elements like the synth solo on Jump or just the massive drum machine that is Hot for Teacher. I would say that's the closest comparison. Plus, it's an album I've listened to start to finish, which I will be completely honest, for most 80s metal albums, I can't quite say I've done that for yet.
Matthew, do you have anything else to add about this album before I have you pick between two random factors to decide our next review?
No, again, if you're into 80s metal or if you're into, strong guitar solos, this is going to be an album for you. And if you're looking to get into something like that, this is a good place to start.
All right, excellent. So, Matthew, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so for our next review, I'm going to have you pick between two numbers here. The numbers are 178 or 924.
I'm going to go with 178.
Oh, man, I was hoping that you were going to do that, man, because we're going to go from heavy metal from the 80s to jazz. We're going to be talking about Charles Mingus in our next episode, and more specifically, his album, Mingus
Mingus So jazz finally makes its way onto this podcast.
Finally, man. And I love the little streak that we've been going on. We went from 80s hip-hop to Bleed American, which was emo pop punk from the early 2000s, to heavy metal that we literally just discussed, to jazz. So, yeah, man, I can't wait. So, that being said, if you reached this point in the episode here, and you like what you heard, which is kind of evident by the fact that you are actually listening to me talk at this stage in the game in the episode, the best way that you can support me and Matt here is by, on your podcasting platform of choice, give us a follow, a subscribe, leave us a positive rating, give us the highest rating that you can give us. If you're listening to us on the YouTubes, like this video, subscribe to the channel. But for the last time in this episode, I am Ryan Kearns.
And I am Matt Derzik.
Now that the battle is over and the clouds are hanging low, I gotta get out of here. I don't want to be around.